enough to bring in, but looks like we're pretty well filled. Welcome to everybody. I wasn't here last month. How many new faces do we have here today that haven't been here before? Welcome. Gee, you're helping to fill us up. We need you. We need more new ones next time. We could, if we need to, we could open the petition. I think we can move some people out that are there, and we could get maybe up to 70 people in. So as far as I'm concerned, if we don't have reservations required, standing room only, we got work to do. A couple of items before we get started with tonight's talk by Don Lewis on the B-17 experience. We have our speakers for the, let's see, we're in April, and for the May and the June talks are here tonight, so I'd like to introduce them. Don Mack will be talking on, he's the Indianapolis survivor, and Vince DeRocher is the CVE USS Bolt subkiller. We are hoping to arrange, and this is going to take some help from some of you people. Vince DeRocher has a 5-foot 3-inch long operating model of the carrier that he was on, and he would like to, or is agreeable to having it on display here in the library during the month from May until June. What it requires is a plexiglass display case for it so that fingers don't get too close to it, and unfortunately that costs $500. I've had about a third of it committed so far. If there were some people here who would be willing to put in some money, generally, I'll say 3 or 4 at the $50 level, or you could work it on down. It'd be nice if we could do that. I don't think we should bring his model in unless we can protect it for him. It has been used in a number of ship reunions. Elevators for the planes operate. I'm told if it floats in the water, the water comes out of the scuppers, if you know what the scuppers are, even if you don't know. And so, so anyhow, if there are some here who would donate, it'd be a tax-deductible donation to the library, it would be possible for us to make this arrangement and may have his carrier here. So I guess without further ado, I don't want to cut into Don's talk too much. Let's go ahead with tonight's talk, B-17 trip over Europe.
Thank you, Don. Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to give you a chronological story of what happened to one soldier during World War II. Shortly after Pearl Harbor was bombed, volunteered for the U.S. Army, went into basic training at St. Louis, Missouri, Jefferson Barracks, which was essentially a gross waste of time. Took a bunch of tests, was assigned to the Army Air Corps. You need the mic? Is that better? Okay. I was assigned to the Army Air Corps based on some tests, and was given an opportunity to choose among several technical schools to attend. I remember some of them. There was photography, engine mechanic, aircraft mechanic, and aircraft armor. Well, I was a gun nut at the time, and I chose aircraft armament. And I built scads of model airplanes and hung them from my bedroom ceiling as a boy. So I attended aircraft armament school at Lowry Field in Denver, Colorado. Beautiful location, especially at that time. Finished in the upper part of my class and was peeled off to be an instructor. I instructed fighter aircraft armament for 9 months, got bored with it, volunteered for a number of things, including aerial gunnery. Well, it didn't take long till I was picked off for aerial gunnery school. went to aerial gunnery school at Las Vegas, Nevada. Another great place, especially in the spring. And at aerial gunnery school, we spent, as in armament school, we spent 8 hours a day in class. These courses were cut down to half their normal running time. We shot everything from BB guns to shotguns, rifles, ground machine guns, and finally into the air. Is this mic set okay?
Yeah.
After graduating from aerial gunnery school, I was assigned to a crew for B-17, crew number 104, and shipped to Coyote, Texas. It's about as near to the end of the world as you can get. It's west of the Pecos. And there we trained for a few months, and then went up to Dalhart, trained a few more months. The training, as I remember, it was mainly for the benefit of the pilots and the navigator. A little bit of time was spent dropping bombs, very little time was spent in aerial gunnery practice. And the practice we did have was ground strafing, which was a rather ridiculous mission for a B-17. We never did it. A lot of the ranchers lost cattle though in the process. But they got well paid for it. From there we went to, now this would be the summer of 43. From there we went to Lincoln, Nebraska to be issued our final kit of weapons, clothing, parachutes, and an airplane. Brand new B-17F, just like this. Looked just like this. It was no paint. It was gorgeous. We had it one day, and they took it away from us. The losses over Schweinfurt, Germany, were so great that they scooped up every available B-17, B-24, and ferried them over to England to replace them. Now you're wondering, what happened to the crews? Well, the planes, a lot of planes returned with their crews, but were so badly damaged they were beyond repair. So they needed new planes, and ours was one of them. So this changed the whole complexion of what was going to happen to myself and my crew. Instead of being part of a new squadron, we were going to be replacement crews. So we were briefed on originally we were briefed on going both to England and to North Africa by air. I won't get into the routes, but they were very interesting and also very dangerous. A lot of them didn't make it. And but instead of that, we went by Liberty ship out of Hampton Roads, Virginia. And the ship was sitting in the dock looked tremendous, you know. But when it got out to sea, it looked like a little rowboat, 310 feet long, and those seas must have been 20 or 30 feet high most of the time. Although we never had a storm, but there was rolling seas the whole way over. We were in a huge convoy, protected by destroyers and destroyer escorts. There were 2 ships were sunk in the convoy, but they were quite a distance from where we were. We were lucky. We got over without any problem. After 22 days, I want to tell you how bad it is on those things. The food was absolutely horrible. All we had was canned sea rations. That was the only food they had on board. There was no bread, no fresh vegetables, no fresh fruit. It was sea rations and water. 22 days of it. On the last day out, the 22nd day, I knew we were going to North Africa because I slept on deck the whole time. I couldn't stand the stench down below. I slept in a life raft with a tail gunner, rain or shine. And as we went over, could look out off to the left side of the ship, which would be the port side, and you could always see the North Star there every night, always in the same position. So I knew we were going. due east, so it would be North Africa. And we did end up in Casablanca. And the last day, when we woke up, we were all alone. We had no escort. And the sea was as flat as this floor. And you could see our own wake going out to the horizon. A little while later, a little bit of a ship came up, looked like a big canoe. Turned out to be a destroyer escort. And it took us into Casablanca. Fortunately, there were no subs around. From there, we flew to Tunisia, and I was assigned to the 2nd Heavy Bombardment Group, 429 Squadron. And this is a picture of my crew that was taken in Dalhart, Texas. We were a lot younger then, of course.
Pass it around and you can.
So in Tunisia is on the northern rim of North Africa, and contrary to my idea what North Africa looked like, it was actually fertile land. There's a lot of farms there that grow fruit, a lot of olives, grain. We flew. The very first mission was to Wiener Neustadt, Austria. That's the new city of Vienna, right outside Austria, where the Nazis had built a Messerschmitt plant. And we got a mighty warm reception with both flak and fighters. But strangely, our squadron was not attacked by fighters, but we flew through heavy flak. The squadron right beside us lost 2 planes. And I think everybody survived. I saw 10 shoots come out of both planes. So that was our baptism of fire. Then the subsequent missions were mainly in support of the ground troops fighting in Italy, trying to disrupt the transportation system. We bombed marshalling yards, railroad bridges, and viaducts. That was sort of our hardtack mission. Again, fortunately, the Germans didn't have enough fighters to spread over every town in Italy. And one of the targets we visited frequently was Bolzano, which is we went here 2 or 3 times. Well, here's Venezia, which is Venice. Verona, you know, Verona was Romeo and Juliet. Bolzano is here. Now, we flew out of a town called Foggia, which is in southern Italy on the Adriatic Sea, directly opposite Naples. So it's a pretty good trip up there and back. By the time you got, our first mission was, we were 10 hours in the air, and we were all absolutely exhausted by the time we got back. The noise level on a B-17 is beyond comprehension unless you're in it. It's just rattle your brains out. You can't talk to each other except through a throat mic. If you read lips, you might be able to. And that's very fatiguing. That and the tension of wondering when the enemy's going to bounce on you any minute. And the first mission was so long that for our fuel supply, we just didn't have enough to do it. And it was planned that we would land in Sicily, which we did. And they refueled us. And that was quite a place to be in 1943. They were still in the dark ages there. That's okay, off. Okay. And we refueled and then made the balance of the trip back to North Africa. Another mission was to Athens, Greece. There's an airfield, it was a civilian airfield that the Nazis had commandeered and were using to wage their war against the Greeks. So we bombed that field with, first time we ever dropped anything other than 500-pound bombs. We had, we must have had literally hundreds of fragmentation bombs in our bomb bay and 100-pound high explosive bombs. And I understand it was a very successful mission. We caught a lot of planes on the ground, blew up repair shops and so forth.
We were not attacked by fires on that one either, but we were attacked over Bolzano. We also bombed the rail going into Venice for some strange reason. I think that Venice is a very important seaport up that area and has good shipping facilities and good rail facilities leading out of it into northern Italy. So altogether, we managed to put in 14 missions, 2 of which were aborted because of engine overheating. We had to shut the engine down. We couldn't keep up with the formation, had to come back alone. Again, fortunately, the fighters didn't come after us, because if they had, we've been dog meat. Alone, you're just helpless. And one mission was up to, turn that on again, please.
We were heading all the way for,
a little town called Palo, P-A-L-O, an important rail junction there near Trieste. And we didn't quite make it. One of our engines overheated to the point where it had to be shut down.
yeah, there's Trieste, near there.
Flying back from there alone, flew back over the Dalmatian Islands along the coast of Yugoslavia. They are absolutely gorgeous. Emerald green, as green as Ireland is. And on the top of every other island mountain is a castle. It seemed all you had to have was a few bucks, you could put a castle up on an island there at one time. They shot at us, but they were very poor gunners. They probably a good half-mile under us. But we were sweating all the way back. And we flew all the way down the Adriatic and then cut across Italy. It was a very heavy cloud cover, and the navigator got confused. He, for some reason, didn't know whether we had crossed over Italy or not. By this time, the 3 remaining engines were really gobbling up the fuel, trying to keep altitude, and we were running critically short on fuel. The pilot, I can still remember him calling the navigator up into the cockpit, and he's reaming them out, and they got the maps that spread out between the 2 pilots, and they finally decided where they probably were. And there were, as I say, nothing but clouds under us, so we didn't know where the heck we really were. And you weren't allowed to use your radio. So fortunately, a hole opened up in the clouds, and there was an island under it. We didn't know what island it was. And the navigator said it's either Corsica or Sardinia. He didn't know which. He said, I think it's Sardinia. And there was an emergency landing strip there, and we didn't have enough fuel to fool around, so the pilot took it straight in and landed on a metal mat and about 3 inches of muddy water on it. And just as we touched down, a second engine ran out of fuel. One engine had already been shut down. Second engine ran out of fuel, quit, taxiing. Third engine quit. Coming in on 1 engine into the parking area, we got into our assigned spot, and it took about 4 turns of the prop, and it quit. Absolutely out of gas. So that's as close as we came to crashing for mechanical reasons. On the 9th of December, 1943, the day after my 21st birthday, we packed up everything we had, the officers' tents, our tents, everything we owned, into your B-17, and we flew up from Tunisia to Foggia. That plane had about as much weight as it could take off us. We used every inch of the runway. And the weather over Europe right then was very bad. We couldn't fly a mission until the 19th of December. We were called in for a briefing. We're going to bomb Augsburg, Germany. Oh no, Germany, God.
Augsburg is almost off the map here. Above and beside.
It was at the outer reaches of our fuel. We had 3,000 gallons in the particular plane we had, which was an older one. It was not one of these. It was an older model. So we approached Augsburg, a little west of it, used Ulm as a checkpoint, probably the Cathedral Ulm, Landeck, and a couple other towns.
Looped around like this. You
Came from north to south, so you're heading toward home on your actual bombing run. Strangely, there were no fighters over Augsburg. I thought, this is weird. They must have read our minds, but there was lots of flak, and we took several hits. None of them was very damaging, but I could hear it rattling on the wings and making the plane jump up as it hit under us. So our secondary, I had my story. We couldn't drop our bombs on Augsburg because it was cloud covered. We got a radio message, matter of fact, about 10 minutes before we got over the target from a Pathfinder. That's a P-38 that went ahead, and it was stripped of everything. He had no weapons, he had nothing but a radio and a camera, and it could outrun any airplane the Germans put in the sky. And he radioed back and said, you're not going to be able to bomb Augsburg, but by that time it was too late. We were already headed for it. And the commander, I think that day we had a colonel leading the group. And he kept us right on the planned track. Came over Augsburg, didn't drop our bombs. Secondary target was Innsbruck, the railroad yards in Innsbruck. Now, if you've ever been in Innsbruck, you know the railroad yards are right smack dab in the middle of the city. So if any of them miss, and plenty of them do, somebody gets killed, a lot of nice property gets ruined. Well, I don't know whether they ever hit the target or not because the fighters came at us hot and heavy. As I was scanning the sky for fighters. Your heart's going a mile a minute, your mouth's dry, and wondering where they're here. I know they're here, but I can't see them. Where are they? I'm looking. I was a bull turret gunner. This is the bull turret. You have a tremendous view of what's going on under you and around you, but you can't see anything over you. Then I noticed from their silhouette, there were F-109s. I thought it was one or two planes. It was on our same level and about 2 o'clock. It's a little bit higher than level, just high enough that I would have to shoot through the props, which you can't do even if you wanted to because there's an interrupter cam on, so you don't shoot your own propellers off. Because those caliber 50s can just shear a prop right off. So all I could do was watch these guys come. The first one came in, you can see the orange flashes coming out of the wings, and you just hope he's a bum shot. All I can do is wait till he gets close to me and try to follow him. He came down like this, and after I got in this zone, I could get my guns on him, but the closing speed is well over 500 miles an hour. We're doing about 200, he's doing about 320. And I figured out later that I had only 1 second effective firing time because range was only 600 meters on those machine guns. So I made out like I was tracking these guys so at least they would know there was somebody in the turret there, you know. The first one peeled off, and right behind him is another one. I mean, he was so close behind him, they looked like one. Then there was another one behind that, and another one behind that, and so forth, till there were 6 of them, right in a string. And they disappeared. A few minutes later, there was another group there. This time they were Focke-Wulf 190s. That's the one that has the radial engine. Donald, hold it up there. There were 6 of them in a row. Evidently there were squadrons of 6. And the flak was the most accurate I had ever seen. It was absolutely on our elevation, dead on. Oh man, and we kept flying closer and closer to it. They were not attempting to lead us. They had, at that point in the war, they had found that a box barrage, which was, I consider, a piece of the sky as big as this room, they just fill that with flak first, and then you fly through it. And it's very effective, rather than try to lead you. They had their altitude so good, I wondered, boy, these guys must have some awfully good instrumentation here, because I never saw the altitude that close before. And here off to one side was a twin-engine German fighter, radio and the altitude down to the ground, so they had it right on. He was out of range, he was about 1,000 meters away. So I knew if we got through this without getting hit, it was going to be a miracle. It was just a matter of how badly we were going to get hit. And then all at once, the plane rose up, shuddered from an explosion of flak. I had it fixed for a little below and in front of the nose. And then moments later, I noticed the #1 engine, which is the left-hand engine. I'm sorry, this one here.
Port engine, is
Yeah, that one had been shut down and the prop feathered, so it had been hit evidently, and they were afraid it'd catch fire if they kept running it, the pilot that is. And then I noticed under the wing on the left side, well, left and right, but I noticed it on the left side. You can't see it from here probably, but there's a cowling with a drain valve there for the mechanics to drain gasoline if it becomes contaminated. It has an outlet about 2-inch diameter. That was sheared off by a piece of flak, and the gasoline is pouring out of there like it's coming out of a fire hose. It was only going about 3 or 4 feet, and that was vapor. Now a machine gun throws a flame about that long out its muzzle. Every 5th round is a tracer, and every 5th round is a incendiary. So it has a burning tail, and the tracer has a burning tail. So I knew you can't fire these guns anymore, you're going to blow the ship up if you do. So then I just followed the planes and made out like I was firing so that they wouldn't figure they had a, free reign of things all to themselves. Then the #2 engine was hit by flak and dislodged from its mount and was hanging down at a crazy angle, just holding on by 2 bolts. I figured this plane can't stay up much longer, I'm going to get the hell out of here. So I got out of the turret into the waist section of the airplane, and as I stepped into the waist, I noticed at random positions all over orange balls, 20 millimeters from fighters bursting all inside the plane. I turned, something caught my eye, and I turned and looked. I had just gotten out of the turret in time. There was a flexible line from the oxygen bottle that led down. We had to breathe oxygen at those altitudes. That mission was 26,000, the temperature would be about -50 F. We wore heated suits, but we still froze. And that flexible line was covered with stainless steel weave to give it extra strength. And it was burning like a Roman candle. a 20 millimeter burst right on it. Had I been in a turret, I would have had a face full of burning oxygen and 20 millimeter. I saw some guys melt their ears off, someone blind them, burn their nose off. It's terrible. And if you happen to be taking a breath at that moment, you're dead because it goes into your lungs. So once inside there, I was wearing a flak vest. Matter of fact, we were all wearing a flak vest except one fellow for some reason didn't pick his up. And it was the first day we had been issued one. Now you can't wear a parachute in your combat assigned positions, most certainly not in the bull turret. But you wear the harness and you have a quick connect arrangement on the front, so you just go like that, and the canopy snaps on. The canopy is about, when it's packed, it's about that long, about that wide, and about that deep. I stowed it outside the turret on a little ledge. I stood there watching what was going on, and I thought, oh my God, this plane isn't going to stay up much longer, we better get the hell out of here. So then I had the decision to make. Are you going to protect yourself against machine gun fire and 20 millimeter, leave your flak vest on, and not put the parachute on? Or are you going to put the parachute on? If you put the parachute on, you got to drop the flak vest. Something inside my head said, drop the flak vest. It's more important to get that parachute on, and I did. I went to the door to open it. Well, I had a very brief conversation, like with sign language, with the two waist gunners. I said, you know, we got to get out of there. Agreed, you know, let's go. And I wasn't the senior non-com, but I took it on myself to take charge. And the tail gunner was still in his position, so I picked up some empty brass, threw it at him, hit him in the back several times, but he never moved. He apparently dead at his position. So about that time, the left waist gunner dropped right at my feet like a wet towel. And he had apparently been hit in the back with a machine gun fire, because I couldn't find a mark on his chest or his head or anything. I shook him, pinched him, and no response. He was the one that had no flak vest on. So I went to the door. You can't see it on this picture, so maybe Don will hold up the model and show you. This is a door we normally get in and out of a B-17 on. It also serves as
Where the light is over there.
as an escape.
The door's open.
It's time to work here.
It's only about that tall. Just a little wider than the shoulders of a big man. And it's the escape mechanism, emergency release for the door is composed of just two pins that act as hinge pins that are connected by about 1/8 inch stainless steel cable led through a couple of drilled holes and out to a T-handle. And I pulled on that and nothing happened. And I put my foot against the fuselage and pulled, and the cable stretched, but it still wouldn't release. The plane was so badly damaged that it was twisted and jammed that door. So I said, well, we got to get out of here somewhere. I said, how about go to Bombay? So we started to move toward the Bombay part, which is well forward of there. And I didn't know if the doors were open even, because the radio room is in between and the door on the radio room was closed. And we never got an order to bail out over the intercom. The intercom was probably shot out. I'll give the pilot credit for that. About that time the plane goes, and all this is only taking a few seconds to happen. About that time the plane goes up on its nose, down on its nose, tail goes up. You can feel, that's a really weird feeling, B-17, which you never felt do anything but take gentle turns before. And then into a spin, a violent spin. But we had two engines were running probably at full throttle. And in order to compensate for the power all on one side, I'm sure the pilot had all the trim tabs set over as far as they'd go. So once this thing went out of control, I learned later the pilot had left his seat, that's why it went out. It went into a spin. Well, in a spin like that, just like in a crane separator, you can't move. You're plastered against the side of the fuselage. You cannot move a muscle. Oh God, this thing's going straight down and it's screaming. Well, this is it. Next thing I know, it's going to hit the ground. I'm going to be dead. I'm going to go from one end of the plane to the other. I'm going to tear off all the flesh on my body. And that'll be it. Only a few seconds later, not really what I thought was enough time to reach the ground. It was a tremendous explosion. This is it. We hit the ground. But I'm not moving toward the front of the plane. That's strange. The forces are in the wrong direction. Tremendous blast hit me right in the middle of the back, like a fire hose. And I closed my eyes, of course, to protect them. And when I opened them, I'm out in blue sky. I'm clear out of the airplane. And I looked up. I'm falling on my back, head first, feet about this angle. I looked up, and the plane looked like a artist's rendition of how you put parts together. All the engines were off their mounts. One wing was off, the wing closest to me. That would be the left wing. The tail was missing, I don't know where it was. The fuselage was broken in at least 3 parts. And there was inflatable life raft was falling free. It had, the explosion had opened the door of the inflatable life raft compartment, which is on the, in this region, around where the radio operator's room is. Unfortunately, I remembered our bailout training, which was only classroom. We never actually took parachute jumps because our parachutes were so small. We would have been injured almost certainly in practice. There were only 18 feet diameter canopy, whereas the paratroopers is 26 foot diameter. To give you an idea how much faster we came down. And the training said, if you don't have a bailout bottle, which I didn't, and I couldn't have held it in my hand anyway, even if I had. There was one there, but I forgot to pick it up. You should delay opening the chute until you're down about 10,000 foot above ground. So I free fell, what I thought was a long, long ways. It was actually probably less than 30 seconds. And something inside my head said, you know, you don't know what's under those clouds down there, and you're probably over the Alps, and the Alps have peaks that are like 14, 15,000, you're 26. I didn't know how much altitude we had lost in the spin, but I wasn't going through a lot of arithmetic. That is, something actually inside my head said, you better pull the chute. And I was so calm. It's a big D ring on the right hand side. I guess I figure everybody's right hand. And I pulled that and it didn't open. I was like, oh my God, I got out of that airplane alive, now I'm going to get killed in the fall. I hadn't pulled it hard enough. There's a cable on the end of the D ring that winds its way through a bunch of little eyelets, and to make sure it doesn't get released accidentally, like somebody step on it or something like that. There's some stitching there. Well, I think the parachute packer was a little overzealous in the amount of stitching he used. The next time it opened and that ring's still in orbit. And the chute opened beautifully, and I remember to cross my legs and bring my arms in so I don't break your arm in case you get wrapped up in the shrouds. And you certainly don't want the chute to open up between your legs and give you a flip that way. No. But when it opened, I thought it was going to break my neck. My head must have weighed a ton. And it just crushed down on your neck and spine. But I actually wasn't hurt at all. So then everything quieted down, and then parts started falling all around me, parts of the airplane, and that inflatable life raft almost landed in the middle of my canopy, just barely missed it. It's burning. It fell right alongside me. Other bits and pieces fell. The big pieces I never saw. I don't know where they must have. Well, I guess we were separated maybe 50 yards or so I didn't see them. They got to the ground before me, I'm sure. I'm drifting down so slowly, I thought, oh my God, you're going to starve to death up here. You'll never get down. And you haven't heard silence till you bail out over the Alps in wintertime. Absolutely utter silence. All the planes were so far away you couldn't hear them anymore. And then I realized I'd been hit, at least in the wrist. The wrist was bleeding, and I could see there was an opening there. And I wore a first aid kit on our harness on the left side. Took that off, bandaged it up. Still falling. Don't seem to be making any progress here. I don't know, still looks the same as it did 5 minutes ago. You know? I was so high, it took quite a while to get down. And then I smoked at the time. I thought, I got time for a cigarette. I got a cigarette now. Find the matches, you know. Then I realized, oh my God, those clouds are coming up fast. The hell with this cigarette. I dropped that. So, and I thought, this is ridiculous. You get this far, you're gonna break every bone in your body when you're no way you're gonna live through this. So I was falling at one hell of a rate, I'll tell you. And right under those clouds were the tops of huge tannin trees, tannin bombs. I mean, those babies were 90 feet tall. So I went right down the side of one of these tannins. I hit every limb on the way down, which was a blessing. I didn't get a scratch. I landed on the ground. We were told you'd land on your heels and be thrown over backwards, and I expected all that. Sure enough, I landed on my heels, and the chute was hung up in the tree to the point where I was just like this, and my shoulders were barely touching the ground. And you're told to pull your head up into your chest, put your arms across your chest, at least get your elbows in, because a lot of guys land like this and shatter their elbows on rocks or frozen fields. And I saw a lot of that later on. In very rocky area. I was in the South Tyrol of the Alps. I didn't know where I was at the time. I could only guess. So I tried to get the chute down because it's winter time. It's the 19th of December, and we're about it's about 8 or 9,000 foot altitude, and it can get mighty cold there. Fortunately, it was fairly mild. At least it seemed mild to me. I thought it was, I would guess, about 20, 25 degrees Fahrenheit. It was a dusting of snow on the ground. It was very foggy. You couldn't see any distance at all. I knew I was on the side of a very steep mountain, about as steep as you can stand. So the chute wouldn't come down. It was hung up. And I thought, the first thing I'm thinking of is evasion of capture. I'm hoping I'm somewhere near Switzerland. So I got out of the parachute, I dropped the whole harness and all. You have a quick disconnect. And started walking along the mountain, parallel to the mountain, and I realized, geez, I've been hitting the knee. Oh man, it started to hurt. And I went about 100 yards and I came across a major section of the fuselage. And the skin was missing on the top and on the left side of it. The tanks must have blown up on under the left wing. And the whole turret was missing, although the floor of it was there, but the rest of the top turret was missing. The top turret is, the top turret is this, and that extends all the way down to the main spars underneath. It sits like right on top of the wing spars. And all that metal was missing. So I could look in there easily, and there was nobody in there, but there was a boot on top of the turret, or caught under the turret floor. It was a fleece-lined leather boot. And I recognized it as that of the flight engineer, George Salisbury. And I thought, oh God, George is in there and he's dead. And tears started coming to my eyes. But I grabbed the boot and there was no foot on it. And I couldn't find any bodies in there. And I think, well, I can't stand around here too long. The enemy would be up here looking for me. So I kept on going about another 100 yards. And sat down to think out my situation. We carried an escape kit in our flight coveralls. Now all I had on was long winter underwear, a heated suit, which of course had no electricity to heat it, and then a rather light wool gabardine flight suit, beautiful wool gabardine coveralls. And my boots were missing. They either had been blown off in an explosion or came off when the chute opened. I learned later that a lot of guys came down without their boots because they came off when their parachute opened. So all I had on my feet were a pair of heavy OD wool socks my mother had knit for me. I probably wouldn't have my feet today if I hadn't had them on. And it was a dusting of snow, about an inch. In places it was a good bit deeper than that. It drifted about 2 to 3 feet in some places. So in this kit, the escape kit, which was just a plastic box, like so, there was a map printed on silk, and a compass, escape money, $300 worth of sorted currencies for the countries you'd be likely to be over, which in those days was a lot of money. And I got the map out and opened it up. It's all of Southern Europe's on this one map. I mean, what the hell good's this? You know, I don't even know where I am. But then I started looking at the terrain, and I figured, well, you got to be in the Alps, probably in the Southern Alps, and Switzerland will be that way, okay, toward the west. But I had no idea how far it was. And I started thinking, you'll freeze to death up here, and the first night you won't even make Switzerland. And Switzerland is probably at least 50 miles away. Well, I learned later it was more like 60 or 80 miles away. Plus you couldn't get into it. It was a veritable fortress the Nazis had it surrounded with barbed wire and guards. And then I remembered some other training we had. They said if you're ever shot down in Germany or Austria, it would be a good idea to get rid of your sidearm. We were issued caliber 45 automatic pistols, which were carried in a shoulder holster under my left arm. So I took the whole thing off and buried it in the snow. I figured if I can't have it, by the time spring comes, they find it'll be a mass of rust. And then I heard voices. It sounded like a party, young people laughing and talking, you know. Uh-oh, they're out there, they're above me, they're higher up the mountain than I am. So I quick walked down the mountain through a patch of snow about half the size of this room, and then doubled back and to one side, hoping that I'd fox them into thinking I'd gone down the hill. Sure enough, they stood at the top of the hill, and there was 4 of them. One of them was a young woman, and then there was a man in a uniform, which looked like a dopey uniform, so I guessed it was Italian at the time. Because during the war, they had some of the dopiest uniforms you ever saw. And 2 civilians. And I peeked out from under a boulder I was hiding behind. I had all olive drab on. Our flight coveralls were olive drab. My socks were olive drab. My leather helmet was brown, but tending toward olive brown. And the moss on that mountain, and it's loaded with moss. We went back many years later to that spot. It was almost exactly the same shade of green as my outfit. So I swear they looked right at me but never saw me. They left, and I waited about 10 minutes to make sure they weren't foxing me, and come back. And I walked along the mountain a little further. By this time, my knees getting so stiff I can hardly walk. And I realized I had to get off that mountain. I just had hope I would either run into friendly people, and if not, be taken a prisoner of war and perhaps survive the war. I certainly wouldn't survive on that mountain that night. By this time it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the sun is already well on its way down, and the heat's draining out of the air rapidly. So I started walking straight down the mountain. It was so steep that I had to use the help of trees to make my way from step to step, or else I'd go tumbling head over heels down the mountain. And as I said, it was very foggy, but every now and then the fog would clear and then it would come in again. At this point it was so foggy I could hardly see the trees in front of me. And then all at once a little breeze came up and blew the fog away, and down the hill right in front of me, only about 50 yards away, is a man with a rifle and a boy with a pitchfork. So I put my hands up, but at this point I was glad I'd gotten rid of the 45 because he may have shot me if I'd had it on me. So I put my hands up. He raised the gun first. I put the hands up. And he just stood and looked at me for several minutes. And I know once he realized this guy's no threat, he put the gun down and motioned me to come to him, which I did. And he helped me down the mountain. He knew a prepared path, which I didn't. And I was going through the boulders up to that point. So he led me into an old house. I learned later it was built in 1684. This thing looked like it grew out of the ground. It was a real Swiss chalet. The roof, as it came down on the back of the house, which would be the high side of the mountain, of course, almost touched the ground. It only cleared about 5 feet. And one end of the house was animals were kept, milk cows mainly, and chickens and so forth. And the family lived in the balance of the house. So he led me in there, and I don't know what happened to the boy. I lost track of him. He disappeared. I guess he told him to go home. And I thought the boy and the man lived in this house. And there were 2 women in the living room, which is also a place to sleep. And there was I think it was a double bunk there. And there was a built-in seat under one of the windows, and they laid me down there and allowed me to rest for about 20 minutes. And the guy took everything out of my escape kit, including the money, and but he didn't take any personal property. I had a finger ring that my mother and dad had given me, quite a large gold ring with a semi-precious stone in it, and they didn't take that. And after about, there maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and the girl shows up, one of the young women, who I figured was his daughter, shows up with a little glass of schnapps. Well, I didn't know what schnapps was at the time, but I could smell it was alcohol, and I said, here you go. Everything's sign language. The little talking that was going on, I figured was German. So I thought it was in Austria. So they gave me the schnapps, and our first aid instruction says you shouldn't take any alcohol when you're wounded. But to make them happy, I drank the schnapps. So after a bit, he motioned to me, come on, we gotta go, and he led me down the mountain, quite a distance. I guess it's a good half-mile down to the floor of the valley from there, and then another maybe 3/8 of a mile along the a prepared road, which was unpaved, but it was hard. And as I approached a big white building, which I thought was a town hall, all along the path on the left side was lined up with civilians, mainly women, a few old men, and some children. And right where the footpath joined this main road was the waist gunner who had been killed right beside me. His chute had opened up in the concussion, and he parachuted to the ground. His body did. And as I walked by this assemblage of civilians, I made eye contact with two of the women. I would guess they were middle-aged women. And they both burst into tears. Boy, people really have compassion for you, you know. I guess I must have looked a pretty bad sight. Plus, I looked a lot younger than I really was. When I was 21, I looked more like probably 17 or 18. I was guarded until I was about 28 years old. And I guess they related me to them because I was very fair and in complexion. I had light brown hair, looked very Anglo. So we went up to this house, building, which I thought was a town hall, and my guide, the captain, opened the door, and in there were 4 of the crew members. Well, at this point, I thought, I'm the only one who could possibly live through this. You know, I was certain I was the only survivor. But here were 4 of the crew members in there. The other waist gunner, who had, I failed to tell you, had gone unconscious just before the plane went into a dive. I thought he was going into unconsciousness for lack of oxygen because we hadn't been on oxygen for several minutes and at very high altitude. And I attributed that to the fact he was about 3 years older than I was. I figured he wasn't as tough, you know. But he had been hit, a direct hit right on the calf of his leg, and it blew the whole calf muscle off. It was hanging on by about an inch of muscle and sinew at just above the ankle. And he had been brought in with the help of some of the civilians in the valley had located him. They had virtually carried him down the mountain because he certainly couldn't walk. And then I found out from the crew that, well, the fellow who was hit in the leg was unconscious when the plane blew up, and his parachute opened from the concussion. He was unconscious until he came to dangling in a tree. And his feet weren't even touching the ground. He kept crawling for help. And George Salisbury, who I mentioned earlier, heard his calls and went up to him. George was a big, strong guy, and he picked him up bodily so he could release the parachute and drop him to the ground. The radio operator, the first pilot, who was, you might say, a borrowed pilot. We were on a borrowed plane. Our plane had, in the previous mission, developed engine problems on 2 engines, and we were waiting replacements. Engines were a constant problem on B-17s. I guess they were on all military aircraft during the war. So we had borrowed this plane we were in, and the pilot was more experienced than our pilot, so our pilot flew as co-pilot. Well, the first pilot was there, safe and sound. The radio operator was there, and the top turret gunner, who's a flight engineer, was there. And they had all bailed out the bomb bay door seconds before the plane exploded. But they didn't bother telling us. So this room was unheated. It was actually colder in there than it was outside, I thought. We waited around for a while, not knowing what was going to happen to us, and finally an elderly man showed up who I presume was a doctor, and he looked at us, but there was nothing he could do for us. He didn't have any medicine. He bound up Fennessy's leg, that's the fellow that had been hit in the calf, with his own first aid kit. And Fennessy asked me, he said, "Don, do you think they'll be able to save my leg. For some reason, I thought I was the nearest thing to a doctor on board because I guess I got good marks in first aid classes. And I said, Ed, if I were you, I'd plan on losing it. Well, he didn't. I met him many, many months later in a prison camp, and they had saved his leg. Sitting on a straight back chair, waiting for something to develop, and all at once I realized, oh my God, I'm going to faint. I slid down in the chair and hooked the nape of my neck over the back of the chair and went into unconsciousness. And I knew enough about first aid to know I was passing out from shock. It was delayed, but I don't know how long I was unconscious. Nobody paid a bit of attention to me. I came to, and I was in exactly the same position I passed out in. Didn't fall on the floor at least, and felt a lot better. Eventually, a truck came. By this time, it's pitch black at night. It must have been about 5 o'clock. And Fennessy and I were loaded into it, and the other 3 were told to stay there. So I didn't see any of the others until many, many months later. Fennessy and I were driven up through the Brenner Pass. Now, at this point, we're
The crash site is here. Here's our target. We were actually headed, a rendezvous point would have been down here. So somehow we got off track here. And this is the border between northern Italy and southern Austria. It's actually a ridge line. It's as sharp as a butcher knife. And that's where the border is. I was only 5 kilometers inside Austria. Right in here. So they drove us, to get to Innsbruck, you gotta go through the Brenner Pass, which is over here. So that takes secondary roads down to primaries.
up through the Brenner Pass, and in those days, Brenner Pass was a real adventure. Today, you can fly through on essentially level roads, almost like I-70 goes through the Rocky Mountains, you know. Got into Innsbruck about midnight, and all the lights were on the city. Truck pulled up in front of a big building, which I presumed was a hospital, and all the lights were on. Nobody seemed to be concerned about safety from air attack. I was carried, by this point, I couldn't walk at all. I was carried in on a litter into the hospital with Fennessy beside me, and we sat on the edge of a bed for about an hour, and finally some authority came out and said, we can take Fennessy, but you'll have to go someplace else. So I'm back out into the truck again, back down through the Brenner Pass, down to a town called Morano, which is, I'll see if I can find it here.
It's not far from Bolzano. Not far from
Bolzano. Okay. It's a resort town. It's surrounded by mountains, and it's very mild climate in the winter. You know, it's not Florida, but it's a lot better than most of Europe in the winter. And there are a lot of small hotels there, and the Germans had confiscated several of these as military hospitals. So I was driven up to one of these places and carried in and just put on the floor in the lobby. And I knew it was a hotel. It certainly wasn't a hospital because it had marble floors and it had fancy staircase going up. And I just lay there for a while, and finally a German soldier came by carrying a wounded soldier. This was mainly for the casualties coming up from the Italian front, which was a real meat grinder for both the Germans and the Allies. And I asked him what time it was and he said it was 7 o'clock. I had eaten breakfast the day before about 5:30, and that was the last time I had anything to eat or drink other than that ounce of schnapps. and I was dying of thirst. I wasn't hungry, and no, I was the shock. You're not hungry. So finally, they carried me upstairs, and from that point on, they treated me just like a German soldier. I have no complaints at all about the care I was given. I was x-rayed, and the doctor, who pretended he didn't speak English at first, finally broke down, spoke excellent English, and he told me, you have 5 pieces of, he called them steel splinters, we call them shrapnel, in back of your kneecap. And if I operate, I'll make you a cripple. What we'll do is we'll put you in a cast and let it heal up and hope it takes care of itself. Well, I was in a body cast, partial body cast, from just under the breast all the way down to the toes on the left side, and wrapped around the hip. I went completely immobilized this knee. Well, that was hell. 43 days flat on your back. And the food was not good, but it was the same as what the soldiers were getting. And it was a lot better than we got in North Africa, believe me. So finally, I was released from the hospital. They were driven in a truck with 2 drivers and just myself in the back of an open truck, early March, 1944, down to Verona. Verona is, the mythical home of Romeo and Juliet.
Here's Venice, Verona.
The drive down was very pleasant. It was a bright, sunny spring day, and drove by beautiful houses that had murals painted on the walls by skilled artists, all religious scenes from the New Testament. And the truck drove down one of the side streets of Verona, and all at once he came to a stop, and he jumps out and he opens a big gate. Right? These are like row houses, continuously connected, It's a huge gate, about 5-inch thick wooden gate. Truck drives in, and at this point I could walk with difficulty. I got out of the truck, and it's like a different world in there. I found out a little later I was in the Prince of Verona's palace grounds. It was much greener in there than it should have been for that time of year. But there were very tall walls. I would guess they were 12, 14 feet tall, ran both sides of the property up a hill. And it was terraced in gardens all the way back. And on the near right was a pretty good size office building. I imagine it was the administrative headquarters for the Prince of Verona when there was a Prince of Verona. Actually, there never was a prince, but he has a different name. He's called this Knight and Squire of the Duke of Tuscany. He was a squire to the Duke of Tuscany, and it would be like a county. He ruled a county, which included Verona. But his buildings were still there. The palace was up on the hill, and the administrative buildings. And administrative buildings have been converted into interrogation facilities where airmen who were shot down in the area, and I guess any infantrymen that were captured on the Italian front, were brought for interrogation. I was put into solitary confinement there. Fortunately, there was lots of light, and held there for 2 days and 2 nights, and I thought I was going to go out of my mind. And finally they discovered that I'd been shot down 3 months before, and I really had nothing of value for them. They wanted to know my tail number of the plane. They could have hung me up by the thumbs, and I couldn't have told them because it was a borrowed plane, I didn't remember it. So they didn't get anything out of me except my name, rank, and serial number. At the time I was a staff sergeant. So then they released me from there, and I went by train via Munich to Frankfurt to what's called a Dulag. It's an assembly point where airmen, this is just airmen, are collected, and when they got their quota, they load them into railroad cars and ship them off. So life was really pretty decent in the Dulag. Had a very good guy for a commander. We had decent food and were treated decently. But we're only there a few days, and they had their quota, so they loaded us into boxcars, locked the doors, and away we went across Europe, all the way to East Prussia. 3 days and 3 nights. Nothing to drink, except on rare occasions they'd offer a little water around. Very little to eat. Toilet facilities were a terrible problem. You have to wait for them to stop the train, and they'd let 2 or 3 guys out at a time to relieve yourself and back in. So finally we arrived at a camp near Königsberg, which is right under Lithuania, not too far from Finland. Give you an idea how far north we were. We're as far north as the southern end of Hudson Bay, Canada. However, it's not nearly as cold as Canada there. Well, it was March. I think we had a fairly mild March that year, and a beautiful summer, but came July. The Russians had advanced so far, they started their major offensive in May of that year, that they were threatening to overrun that camp. So we were all marched to the nearest seaport, which was Königsberg, and loaded into 2 ships, 5,000 in each ship. Now these were freighters, these were not passenger liners. And the ship I was on had been carrying coal. It was a bulk cargo ship. We're down right on the bottom of there's like about a 3/4 of an inch of steel between us and the sea. And you only had the food you brought with you. I don't remember maybe giving us any water. But we were on there 2 days, and it was a mixed bag of prisoners. There were some British in there, and the one fellow told us, he said, Jesus, I was on missions to mine this area from the air. Beautiful. But the Germans knew about that, and they had a pass swept clean. We got through without hitting any mines, and we weren't even attacked from the air. We went into Stettin and then unloaded at that point and got onto railroad cars again. But this time they only used half the car, and they left the door open. And the other half of the car was devoted to one guard, and the rest of the car was prisoners. And they handcuffed us together. And these were chintzy handcuffs, and some of the guys quickly learned how to pick the locks, and so we could get out of them at will, but you had to keep them on for show. We were handcuffed in pairs. It wasn't a very long trip. It was only a few hours, and inland to Stalag Luft 4. The first camp was Stalag Luft 6. And
May I have your attention, please?
we
The library is
unloaded
closing
on
in
there
30 minutes.
off the
The
car.
copiers will be turned off in 15 minutes. Please
Oh.
make all your copies now.
All at once I
Thank you.
realized,
You're almost there, though. Well, they're gonna throw us out.
30 minutes.
all at once I realized all the guards, most of the guards have been called into like a lecture by a little roly-poly major who was shouting at them and took his gun out, a little tiny pistol, fires a couple shots in the air, get them all stirred up, and they put bayonets on their rifles. Now up to this time, these guys were really civilized, very even social. There were young Kriegsmarines that had lost their ship. The British had managed to sink their ship that they trained for, so they were supernumeraries, and they put them on guard duty. All at once they turned into animals. We were lined up on the road, 3 pairs across. My buddy and I managed to get in the middle, handcuffed together, my left hand to his right hand, handcuffed. We had a barracks bag on our shoulder, and they ran us full tilt, as fast as you could run. And if you didn't run, you got stabbed with a bayonet. And they had dogs, Alsatians, that snapped to your calves and ankles all the way down. It was a hot day in July, and we had woolen uniforms on. I had an RAF uniform on because everything I had on had been stolen in the hospital. And they fixed me up with odds and ends, and then eventually the Red Cross sent in uniforms. British Red Cross, so I was dressed as an RAF man. And it's all wool, and it is hot, especially when you're running with barracks bags. So we ran, some guys said it was 5 miles, some said it was 3, well, I think it was closer to 3. And we had to throw our barracks bags off in order to survive. You know, we'd never keep up the pace if we didn't, so everything we owned, all the food we saved, all our extra clothes and everything's gone. We didn't think we'd ever see them again. Finally got into the camp, and they had tents for us, pretty nice tents, double-walled roof tents, so they were cool. But we slept on the ground for about a week until they finished the barracks for us. In the meantime, we're going around taking inventory of who got stabbed, and some of them had terrible wounds, places I don't want to even talk about. And there was no real medical facilities available there. There were a couple of Allied doctors who had been captured, but they had no bandages or medicine. You use undershirt for bandages. Well, come that winter, February the 4th, we're told fall out, we're going to have to leave again, the Russians are on us. It was the coldest day of that winter. The ground was frozen so hard it would ring under your feet as you walked. And we'd been given about a week's notice to prepare for this, so we'd made like little haversacks and so forth, and saved some food. Since we're running out of time, I'll cut this short. I walked 600 miles in 89 days. Slept on the ground some nights, mostly in barns at night. I was never in a heated room the entire winter. I got so I couldn't even stand being in a heated room. And on the 2nd of May, we knew something funny was going on because some of the guys wandered off away from the barnyard where we were staying, and the guards didn't challenge them. Yeah, I said to my buddy, we'll try it. I remember passing a cheese factory down the road as we came. Let's go back and see if we can get some cheese. So we went out, the guards didn't say beans. We went down, we brought back a whole wheel of cheese. But it was still green. I ate so much cheese I couldn't eat cheese for 4 or 5 years after. We came back, and they said, hey, they're opening up a warehouse in the town the opposite direction. Go down there and help yourself. So we went down. There's a little building about 20 feet square, 1-story building, just off to the side of the road. I don't know what it had originally been used for, but there's a lot of activity going around. There were women outside coming and going, and so we went in there, and sure enough, it was a community, like emergency food warehouse, I guess. There were sacks of, well, the only thing that was left when we got there was sugar. It was 50 kilo sacks of sugar. 50 kilos is about 110 pounds. And, but there had been canned goods and flour and some other things. Some of the guys got flour that were in there before us. Then a woman came in, she's shouting at the top of her lungs, England are coming, England are coming. I mean, the English are coming. Great, this is what we've been waiting for, right? So we took this sack of sugar, I don't know, one end, my buddies on the other, and figured, well, we'll trade for other stuff with the other guys, you know, whatever they've got. Maybe they don't have any sugar. About a quarter mile down the road, around the bend comes a tank. And I recognize it as a Sherman tank, and it has the big white star and the white bar on it. And, oh my God, it's the Allies. It's either the British or the American. We dropped that sack of sugar, and the hell with that sack of sugar. We ran toward the tank. and he met us right about the barn. It was a, what the British call a signal company, we'd call a reconnaissance company. I want you to remember this name, the British Royal 2nd Dragoons. British Royal 2nd Dragoons. They're the ones that overran us and freed us. Wasn't a shot fired, the guards all put their guns up against the barn, and the officer in charge, who materialized out of nowhere, usually there was no officer around, he took his little pistol out of his holster and handed it to the captain in charge of this company. And the company was made up of a tank, and the captain rode in the tank, and there were 2 Bren gun carriers, and as I remember, I think there was 3 truckloads of infantry. And so they stopped in the town for a while, and they got out their little Primus stoves, and they heated up water and made tea, and had tea and crumpets, and the enemy's right in front of them, you know, I mean, it's only a few hundred yards up the road. So they offered us tea, and we had tea with them, and then we exchanged stories, and I said, oh, we can't do much for you guys, we got the enemy on the run, we got to keep going. So you're on your own, and to make a long story short, we worked our way back to a British controlled area, stayed there about a week, waited for airplanes to come to pick us up, to take us to England, which never arrived, so we hitchhiked all the way down through Germany, Holland, Belgium, across France to the coast of France, and got to Camp Lucky Strike, got a ship there, and came home. And that's the end of my story. Lubeck, Germany, just south of Lubeck. We were pushed up into a pocket.
The Russians were coming, say this is Lubeck, and this is the Baltic Sea. The Russians were coming this way, and the British were coming that way. And one time we crossed the Elbe 3 times. I didn't know whether to get us away from the British or from the Russians, but we didn't want to be captured by the Russians because we heard some bad things about them.
During this whole period, were you listed as missing in action? Or?
I was carried missing in action.
So your parents were
involved? That's a story in itself.
Because your parents must have been...
When I was in the hospital in Orana, a German corporal came in and interviewed me, interrogated me. And he was an American. He had lived in Dayton, Ohio, and had gotten a letter from the German government inviting him over, and he, like a jackass, went over and probably got killed. And, volunteered for the army over there, and he's, as I say, he was essentially an American. I don't know if he was 1st or 2nd generation German. And he offered to mail letters for me. Well, I thought, this is nonsense. I don't have a penny. I can't pay for postage. I don't even have paper to write on. Well, he gave me some paper and a couple envelopes, and I wrote letters home. And he said he'd mail them. Believe it or not, they both got home without any postage on them. And that was the first word they had that I was not killed. Because the report was that we were all killed. Nobody saw anybody bail out on the surrounding airplanes. So we were carried as probably killed. But 5 of us lived and 5 didn't. 5 good, smart, strong, intelligent young men died. But that brings me to another point, that the mission of the Air Force, which was then called the Army Air Corps and then later the Army Air Force, in Europe was an important one. We feel we played a very important role in helping win the war in Europe. And I'd like to read what Air Marshal Hermann Göring said after he was captured. You all know who Hermann Göring was, right? Head of the Luftwaffe. The Allies owe the success of the invasion to the air forces. They prepared the invasion. They made it possible. They carried it through. Without the U.S. Air Force, the war would still be going on elsewhere, but certainly not on German soil. Now that comes from the mouth of someone who would know. The 15th Air Force that I was in is credited for virtually wiping out the oil production of the Palestri oil refineries. Now, I never went on one of those missions, but in 1 month they flew 20 missions and they lost 30% of their aircraft and men in 1 month. But they did knock out Palestri to the point, not only Palestri, but the Germans had also built many synthetic oil refineries, which I understand extracted, converted oil into, converted coal into oil. And they were located in Austria. There were 2 or 3 in Austria, and there were some in Germany too. They were all badly damaged by the 15th and the 8th. Worked on them too. As far as total losses go, over the Allied Air Force, the total losses, now this is for both the 8th, the 9th, the 15th, the 12th, and all the other air forces working over Europe, were about 9,800 aircraft. 20,000 crew members were killed in action. Of all the B-17s that were built, 37% of them were shot down. 4,750 of them. And while victory was sweet, it came at its price. There were a lot of good young men did not come home. Any questions?
I just finished a book by Joseph Heller. He wrote Catch 22. He was a bombardier.
Mm-hmm.
He says in his book, did some like 30-some missions, he never used a bomb sight.
Oh yeah, that's quite possible.
B-25.
That's,
But I'm saying,
oh, even the B-17s,
he said he just opened the bomb bay and let him go.
well, probably what he was doing was following the leader. There was a, what was considered the best crew led the flight, okay? And believe it or not, we had as high as generals leading our flights. One mission, we had a 1-star general up front, and then we had full colonels, was ordinary. So the best crew manned those planes, including the best bombardier, the best navigator, the best radio operator, and so forth. And that lead plane would use his bomb sight, and when he opened his bomb bay doors, everybody else opened their bomb bay doors. When his bombs first came out of the bomb bay, they threw the toggle switch and their bombs came out. So you didn't really, you know, PFC could have dropped the bombs. You didn't need a lieutenant to go through school the way we worked it. Yeah. But everybody had to know in case that first plane got knocked down. Occasionally they did. So you had to have somebody behind them, and then that plane get knocked down. You have to have somebody to take his place.
Isn't it true that most of them didn't have bomb sites at all?
No, all of ours have bomb sites. Sir?
I was in the 8th Air Force, and I was a bombardier and navigator. I went to gunnery school. There were bomb sites in every one,
Yeah.
and everyone had to use them because you could be isolated, you didn't know. But sometimes the lead would have smoke bombs on the wings. When they went, you could salvo the bombs or toggle them, but I always use the bombs.
Mm-hmm. Yes?
When you had gotten shot down, I met your buddies there in that one room. Did you then talk with them to find out why they never said bail out?
Yeah.
Did you hold any animosity towards the pilot for not saying that, or you just happened to see him?
A long time after the war, I was put in touch with a man by the name of Keith Bullock, who's an amateur historian who specializes in following up on the survivors of aircraft that were shot down in his part of Austria. He lived in Mills, which is near Innsbruck. And he's British, but he married an Austrian woman and settled in Austria. And when he located me for the benefit of the townspeople, my wife and I were invited back just about, was it a year ago? 96. September 96, we were invited back. They paid for our airfare over. They put us up in a guest house and fed us for 5 days, and it didn't cost us a penny. They treated us royally. And up here, we'll get into this in a minute after I answer your question. After the war, and it must have been quite a bit after the war, maybe months if not years after, all of the crew that was still in the service was interrogated And the pilot was really grilled as to why the co-pilot didn't get out of the plane. Well, that's another story. I think I know why, but the pilot claimed that he gave the bailout order, but he didn't bother to tell anybody, like the radio operator. All he had to do was open the door, and the whole waist is open. You see all the way to the tail, and you could say, you know, out. But he didn't bother. They were so anxious to get out. They knew that plane was only going to stay up for seconds, which it did. If he had had bothered to come across the bomb bay, open that door, and tell us, he would probably have been in the bomb bay when the plane exploded.
You still have the flat in your knee?
I sure do.
But you were able to run on it, that spy.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, they did a good job. It took about 5 years to get full motion. I only had about 20–30% flex for years.
When you were in the mountain, the first people that fellow that found you, the man with the gun, what nationality was he? He was obviously a German sympathizer?
Not really. I learned later that those people were not really sympathetic to the Nazis. That's part of Italy, which originally belonged to Austria. It's called the South Tyrol. If you remember your history, after World War I, the treaty to punish Austria involved ceding over a whole section of Austria to Italy. So while it's part of Italy, the people are really German. They're, culture, you know, they speak German, they think German, they eat German, they live German. That answer your question? But they didn't really sympathize with the Nazis, I don't believe, but they couldn't do otherwise, because if they showed any sympathy toward the enemy, they would be whisked off to a prison camp. As a matter of fact, since we have a few minutes, on we went down December 19th, and in January of the following year, only a few weeks later, a priest, that whole section of Austria is Catholic, and they're devout Christians, and they live like Christians, they practice Christianity. There was a priest said a mass for the 5 men that were killed. They were buried in the churchyard in a temporary grave, wrapped in their parachutes. That priest was arrested and sent to Dachau. And he was in his 30s. And when he got out, his health was so broken he died within a year after being released. That's how lousy they were. Sir?
During the time you were a POW, did you hear anything about how the war was going?
Oh, yes, yes. At times I was in complete ignorance. When I was in the hospital, I got word of the Anzio beachhead through an Italian young woman who worked as part of the staff there. While we were in prison camp, especially the second camp I was in, which was Stalingrad Fort. I understand every crew's got a radio operator, and this guy's really no radios. They had actually managed to build a radio receiver. Now, don't ask me how. You know, I can build a cat's whisker, but I got to have a crystal. And I don't know where they got the crystal. It was probably a crystal radio. You know, we had the makings for like capacitors and resistors, but the crystal is the key. Now the wire they took out of their heated suits for resistors and to wind the coil, the choke coil. And no one but 2 or 3 people knew where this radio was, and it was moved daily. The Germans used to come in periodically and literally tear the barracks apart looking for it and couldn't find it. And we got
May I have
news
your attention,
almost
please?
daily
The library is
as
closing
to
in
how
10
the war was
minutes.
going.
The lights will be turned off in 5 minutes. Please check out all your materials now. Thank you for using the Abington Library.
Did you ever shoot down any planes?
No, the closest I came to shooting one down was I shot the cowling off a Focke-Wulf 190. So I'd like to think maybe I at least busted a spark plug on it.
I've told them that we're running a little bit late, and so we can stay around for a few more minutes of it. I still would like to find somebody that's willing to help out on getting a model together and see me on that. Be sure to be back for next month. Don Mack, and he's outside right now. He has potentially a problem, but he's planning on being here. His son has some medical problems, and that may take priority, or would take priority over it. So if there is a problem, we will get word out to the library here, but we anticipate things are going to be okay. And Vince DeRocher will be here for the next one. I've got some of his materials to make a lot of transparency, so we'll see a lot of what he's talking about. And we hope to have a model of his vessel. I'm pretty sure we're going to have it. And what else do we need to talk about? Anything?
Yeah, I'd like to, while we have the people assemble, the good side of the story. Can I?
Okay, yeah.
Or are you talking about administrative details?
No,
Okay.
go for it.
So, 2 years ago, I got a phone call from I'll call him the mayor of St. Jacob, where I went down. Now, I didn't even know where I went down. Nobody in the crew knew, because during the war, they stripped down the little signs and so forth. And inviting me to come back, and we did. And they had a ceremony planned for September 14th, the day before. It was beautiful up until that time. That night, it snowed about 3 inches. So, and here's the house that I was taken to. It was built in 1686, and this building was built in 1490, and it's still in good shape.